The bell above the diner door gave its usual soft ring, not loud, just enough to turn a head or two. Martha was already carrying 2 plates when she heard it. She didn't look right away. The lunch crowd had thinned, but the evening rush hadn't started yet, and the grill cook had just slid a row of burgers onto the counter. She set the plates down in front of a couple near the window. "Careful, those are hot," she said. They nodded without really hearing her. People often nodded like that, out of habit more than attention. Behind her, the door closed again. She wiped her hands on the towel at her apron and finally glanced toward the entrance. It was him, same as yesterday, same as the day before that. The old man stepped inside slowly, holding the door for a second longer than necessary, like he was giving the outside air a moment to decide if it wanted to follow him in. It never did. He closed the door gently and looked around the diner, not searching, not curious, just looking. Martha had seen that look before, a quiet kind of checking. The way someone glances around a room to make sure it still exists. He nodded once toward no one in particular and walked to the booth near the back wall. Not the window booths, not the counter, always the same booth. The vinyl seat gave a soft sigh as he sat down. Martha grabbed a glass from the rack and filled it halfway with ice. The soda fountain hummed when she pushed the lever. Coffee, black. She didn't need to ask any more. When she walked over, the old man was already folding his hands on the table. His fingers were long and thin, with pale spots along the skin that came with age. They rested there like they had nowhere else to go. She set the mug down in front of him. "Evening." His voice was quiet but steady. "Evening," she said. He gave a small smile. The polite, kind people learn early in life and keep long after they stop meaning it. She poured the coffee. Steam curled upward between them. "Same thing?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She wrote it down anyway, not because she needed to, because that's how she'd always done it. Meatloaf plate, mashed potatoes, green beans, dinner roll. She turned to leave, but something made her pause. The old man had already wrapped both hands around the mug, though the coffee was still too hot to drink. People did that sometimes, held warmth before it cooled. Martha walked back to the counter. The grill cook glanced at her ticket. "Meatloaf again?" he said. "Ahem." He slid the order onto the rail. The diner moved slowly in the late afternoon. 2 truck drivers near the front booth talked about weather and tires. A woman with a stroller stirred sugar into a cup of tea while her baby slept. The old jukebox near the restrooms played something soft and older than most of the customers. Martha moved between tables with the steady rhythm she'd carried for 27 years. Coffee, check. Napkins, refill, smile. She de-worked long enough that the job lived in her muscles. But every few minutes her eyes drifted back to the booth at the rear wall. The old man wasn't reading anything. No newspaper, no phone, he simply sat there. Sometimes he looked at the coffee, sometimes at the salt shaker, sometimes nowhere at all. When the plate came up, Martha carried it over. The smell of meatloaf and gravy moved ahead of her. She set the plate down. "Careful," she said again. "Hot." "Thank you," the old man replied. He picked up the fork and knife slowly, not weak, just careful. He cut the meatloaf into small pieces before eating. 1 bite, pause, a sip of coffee, another bite, no hurry. People who ate alone often rushed through their meals, but he never did. He ate like time was sitting at the table with him. The truck drivers left. The woman with the stroller finished her tea. The diner quieted. Outside, the sky moved slowly toward evening. Martha wiped the counter. She glanced back again. The old man had finished half the plate. He wasn't looking at the food now. His eyes rested somewhere across the room, though nothing was there. After a moment, he seemed to realize his fork had stopped moving. He took another bite, finished the meal the same way he always did. Clean plate, folded napkin. Coffee drained down to the last inch. Martha brought the check. He looked at it carefully, though it was always the same price. His wallet came from the inside pocket of a worn brown coat. The leather had softened from years of use. He counted the bills slowly, not because he had to, because that's how he did things. Exact change, plus $2, always 2. He slid the money under the edge of the plate. "Have a good evening," he said. "You too," Martha replied. He stood up. The booth seat lifted slightly as his weight left it. He placed his chair back under the table with quiet care. Then he walked toward the door. The bell rang again when he opened it. Outside air slipped in for a moment. He stepped out, the door closed. The diner went on. The next day he came again, same time, same booth, same meal. Martha had started noticing him a few weeks earlier. At first, he was just another customer. The diner had hundreds, travelers passing through. Construction workers, retired couples, students with headphones. People came and went, but some stayed, not physically, just in routine. The old man had become one of those routines. 5 o'clock, doorbell, booth in the back, meatloaf, coffee. $2 tip. He never stayed long, 45 minutes maybe. Then he disappeared into the evening again. Martha didn't know his name. She thought about asking once, but the moment never quite felt right. Some customers liked conversation. Some came for quiet. He seemed like the second kind. Still, something about him lingered in her thoughts, not sadness exactly, more like a space around him, like a chair that used to be filled. On Thursday, the diner was nearly empty again when he arrived. Bell rang. Martha looked up immediately this time. He walked the same careful path across the floor, sat in the same booth. She poured the coffee. "Evening." "Evening," he said. His smile appeared again, small, polite. But this time Martha noticed something she hadn't before. The smile always came first. The eyes caught up a second later, as if they needed time to remember what the smile meant. She walked back to the counter slowly. The grill cook leaned against the fridge. "That fella comes in every day now," he said. Martha replied, "You know his name?" "No, you should ask," she shrugged. "Maybe." But she didn't. Instead, she carried the meatloaf plate when it was ready, set it down, watched him thank her, watched him eat. Halfway through the meal, he stopped again, fork in midair, eyes drifting somewhere past the salt shaker, then back again, back to the plate, back to the routine. Outside the window near the door, evening settled into the parking lot. Streetlights blinked on one by one. Cars passed on the highway beyond the gas station. Inside, the jukebox hummed softly. Martha wiped the same clean spot on the counter twice. Her eyes moved back to the booth again. The old man lifted his coffee mug with both hands, held it there for a moment before drinking. Not drinking yet, just holding it like warmth mattered. A week passed, nothing changed. Same arrival, same meal, same careful eating. Martha began preparing the coffee before he even sat down. By the time he slid into the booth, the mug was already waiting. One evening he noticed. "You remember," he said quietly. She shrugged. "Part of the job," he nodded, but the small smile stayed a little longer that time. The next Tuesday it rained, hard rain, the kind that blurs the highway lights. The diner stayed nearly empty all evening. Martha thought maybe the old man wouldn't come, but the bell rang anyway. He stepped inside with drops of rain on his coat. She brought a napkin. "Here, thank you." He dried his hands carefully, sat down, wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. The diner felt quieter than usual with the rain hitting the windows. For a while, neither of them spoke. Just the soft clink of fork against plate, the hum of the refrigerator. And rain. Martha leaned against the counter, watched him finish the last bite. He folded the napkin again, set the fork down, reached for the wallet. Something about the way he moved made her hesitate, not slower, just heavier somehow. Like the room held more weight than usual. She walked over with the check, set it down gently. He looked up, the polite smile again. But this time Martha saw the tiredness behind it more clearly. Not illness, not weakness, just the kind of tired that sits quietly in someone's eyes. He counted the money, placed the bills under the plate, $2 on top. "Have a good night," he said. "You too." He stood up. The rain had softened outside. He walked to the door, opened it. The bell rang again. For a moment he paused there, just a second. Then he stepped out into the dark parking lot. The door closed behind him. Martha stood still for a moment, then she cleared the plate. The coffee cup still held a thin ring of warmth. The next evening the sky was clear again. 5 o'clock came, the bell rang. The old man walked in. Same coat, same booth, same quiet smile. But this time, when Martha poured the coffee, she didn't leave right away. She stood there a second longer than usual, not speaking. Just standing beside the table, the old man noticed. He looked up. Something like curiosity passed through his eyes, and for the first time since she had known him, Martha wondered what would happen if she sat down. Martha did not sit down that evening. The thought passed through her mind, then moved on the way small thoughts do when a person is busy and unsure why the thought appeared in the first place. She went back to the counter instead. The rhythm of the diner pulled her along again. Coffee cups, plates. The quiet scrape of chairs, but the thought stayed somewhere in the back of her mind. The next few days followed the same pattern. 5 o'clock, doorbell, back booth, meatloaf, coffee. The old man never changed his order, and he never hurried. Once or twice, Martha noticed other customers glance at him, not out of curiosity exactly, more like the way people notice something that has become part of the room. A coat on a chair, a newspaper left behind, something steady. On Friday evening, the diner filled up earlier than usual. 2 construction crews came in together, muddy boots and loud voices. The grill cook muttered under his breath as he dropped patties on the hot surface. The air smelled like grease and onions. Martha moved quickly between tables, balancing plates on her arms. When the doorbell rang again, she already knew who it was. She didn't turn immediately. But when she finally looked toward the entrance, there he was. Same coat, same slow step. He waited just inside the door while 2 young men squeezed past him on their way out. Then he walked to the back booth. Even with the diner full, that booth stayed open most evenings. Not because people avoided it, but because most people preferred the windows or the counter. The back wall felt quieter. Martha brought the coffee. "Evening." "Evening," he said. She noticed something different that night. He looked a little tired, not sick, just worn in a way that didn't come from walking or standing. The kind of tired that seems to settle somewhere behind a person's eyes. She placed the mug down. "Cold out there?" "A little," he said. He wrapped his hands around the mug again, the way he always did. Martha hesitated. "Meatloaf?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She wrote it down, then went back to the counter. The construction workers filled the room with noise, laughter, chairs scraping, someone dropping a fork. But in the back booth, the old man sat the same way he always did, quiet, patient. When the plate was ready, Martha carried it over. He nodded his thanks, cut the meatloaf carefully, bite by bite. At the counter, one of the construction workers raised his voice. "Hey, miss, could we get more napkins over here?" "Coming right up," Martha said. She moved quickly, placing a stack of napkins on the table. Another man asked for ketchup. Someone else wanted more coffee. For a while, the diner moved like a machine. Orders shouted, plates sliding across the counter, the grill hissing. But every so often, Martha's eyes drifted back to the rear booth. The old man was halfway through his meal when he paused again, fork resting lightly against the plate. His eyes moved slowly across the room, not looking at anyone, just observing. Martha followed his gaze. It landed briefly on the group of construction workers laughing at something one of them said. Then it moved to the jukebox, then to the door. After a moment, he returned to his plate and finished eating. When the rush slowed, Martha brought the check. He counted the money the same way, exact bills, $2 extra, always two. "You folks stay busy," he said quietly. "Most evenings," Martha replied. He nodded, then he left. Winter settled over the town slowly, not with one big storm, just colder mornings, longer nights. The diner windows began fogging up when the heat ran. Customers came inside rubbing their hands together, steam rising from their coats. Through all of it, the old man kept coming. 5 o'clock, doorbell, back booth. Sometimes he arrived a few minutes early, sometimes a few minutes late, but always close. Martha found herself noticing small things about him. The way he folded his napkin exactly in half before placing it beside the plate. The way he always looked toward the door once or twice during the meal, not expecting someone, just looking. One evening she brought the coffee and noticed he hadn't removed his coat yet. "You can hang that on the rack if you like," she said, nodding toward the stand near the door. He looked down at the coat as if he had forgotten he was wearing it. "Oh," he said softly, "habit, I suppose." He removed it slowly and draped it over the seat beside him. Underneath he wore a gray sweater. The sleeves looked older than the rest of it, as if they had been mended once or twice. Martha poured the coffee. "Cold out there tonight," she said. "Yes," he replied. He paused a moment. Then added quietly, "Used to be colder when I was younger." Martha smiled faintly. "I think people always say that." He considered that, then nodded. "You're probably right." The meatloaf arrived, the same careful eating, the same quiet pauses, but that evening, after a few bites, he spoke again. "Busy night." "Not too bad," Martha said. She was standing beside the table longer than usual now. Neither of them seemed to mind. "You've been working here long?" he asked. 27 years. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's a long time." "It is," she said. He took another sip of coffee. "You must know everyone who walks through that door." "Not everyone," Martha said. She wiped the table beside the napkin holder. "But I remember the ones who keep coming back." The old man gave that small, polite smile again. "Routine," he said. "People like routine." "That they do," Martha replied. She returned to the counter, but something had shifted slightly. The conversation had been small. Nothing important. Still, the air between them felt a little less distant. The days continued. The old man came, ate, left. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. Martha learned he preferred the coffee strong. He learned she always worked the evening shift. One night he asked for an extra napkin. Another night he commented on the weather. Little things, small words that drifted between them like quiet leaves. One evening, just after Christmas decorations had gone up in the diner, the old man arrived later than usual, almost 6. Martha noticed immediately. She had already poured the coffee by 5:30, then dumped it out when it cooled. When the bell finally rang, she looked up quickly. He stepped inside slowly. The cold air followed him. "You're late tonight," she said when she brought the coffee. "Yes," he replied. "Got turned around walking." "Walking? I live a few blocks down." Martha hadn't known that. "Cold night for a walk," he shrugged gently. "I like the air." She set the mug down. He wrapped his hands around it again. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "This place is warm." Martha nodded. "Yes, it is." He ate his meal slowly that evening, even slower than usual. Outside, the Christmas lights from the gas station blinked red and green through the window. Inside, the jukebox played an old song that sounded softer than most. When he finished, he counted the money again. Placed the bills under the plate, $2, always two. He stood up, then paused. "You have a good night, miss?" "Martha," she said. "Martha," he repeated. He nodded once, then walked toward the door. The bell rang softly behind him. A few days later, something small happened, small enough that most people in the diner didn't notice. But Martha did. The old man came in as usual, sat in the booth. She brought the coffee. He thanked her. The meatloaf arrived. Halfway through the meal, a group of teenagers entered the diner. Loud voices, heavy jackets. They filled the counter stools. One of them glanced toward the back booth. Man, my grandpa eats here too, he said with a laugh to his friend. The others chuckled. Not cruel, just careless. The old man didn't look up. He continued eating slowly. Martha heard it, though. She walked over to the counter and placed their menus down a little harder than usual. "What can I get you boys?" she asked. They ordered burgers, fries, milkshakes. Their attention moved away quickly. But when Martha glanced back at the booth, she noticed the old man had stopped eating again. His fork rested against the plate. His eyes were lowered slightly. After a moment, he resumed eating, the same steady pace. Nothing in his face had changed. Still, Martha felt something tighten in her chest. When she brought the check later, she lingered again. "Everything all right?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The polite smile appeared again. But this time it felt thinner somehow. He counted the money, left the $2, and walked out into the cold evening. Martha watched the door close behind him. Then she looked down at the empty plate. The napkin had been folded more carefully than usual. That night after the diner closed, Martha wiped the last table and turned off the lights near the booths. The back booth sat empty now, just vinyl seats and a small salt shaker. She stood there a moment, thinking, not about anything specific. Just the feeling of the room, the quiet, the routine. She imagined the next evening. 5 o'clock, the bell ringing again, the old man stepping inside. Same coat, same careful walk, same booth. She wondered briefly what his name might be. Then she turned off the last light and went home. The next evening came. 5 o'clock, the bell rang, and the old man stepped inside again. But this time, when Martha brought the coffee, she didn't walk away right away. Martha placed the coffee on the table and remained standing. Usually she would turn back toward the counter before the mug even stopped moving on the tabletop. The habit had lived in her legs for years. But this time she stayed where she was. The old man noticed after a moment. He looked up from the steam rising out of the cup. Something about his expression suggested he expected a question. Customers often did when a server lingered. Martha rested her hand lightly against the back of the empty seat across from him. "You mind if I sit a minute?" she asked. It came out simpler than she had expected. The old man blinked once, then he shook his head gently. "No, ma'am." She slid into the booth. The vinyl seat made its familiar soft sound. For a second, neither of them spoke. The diner wasn't busy that evening. A couple near the window shared a slice of pie. The grill cook moved quietly behind the counter, scraping something off the griddle. Outside, the sky had already darkened. The old man wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. "You must be off your feet for a moment," he said. "Just for a minute," Martha replied. He nodded. She noticed that when he held the mug, he didn't always drink right away. Sometimes he simply rested his palms against the warmth. "You've been coming here a while," she said after a moment. "Yes, every evening nearly." "That's right." He didn't seem uncomfortable with the conversation, just careful. Martha folded her hands on the table. "I never asked your name." He looked slightly embarrassed. "Arthur," he said. "Arthur Bennett." "Martha," she said again, though he already knew. "Yes," he smiled faintly. "I remember." A quiet moment passed between them. Arthur picked up the mug and took a slow sip. "Good coffee," he said. "Same pot as always." "That's probably why." The grill cook rang the small bell at the counter. "Order up." Martha glanced back. "Just a second," she called. She stood, grabbed Arthur's plate from the counter, and carried it back to the booth. "Meatloaf." "Thank you." She set the plate down. For a moment she considered leaving again, returning to her usual routine, but instead she slid back into the seat across from him. Arthur began cutting the meatloaf the same careful way he always did, small pieces, measured movements. "You live nearby?" Martha asked. "Yes, 3 blocks down Maple Street." "That's a short walk." "It is." He took another bite. "Been there a long time," Arthur nodded. 42 years. Martha raised her eyebrows slightly. "That's longer than I've worked here." He seemed amused by that. "Then we've both stayed in the same places for a while," she smiled faintly. "I guess we have." Arthur continued eating. Martha watched the quiet rhythm of it. Fork, pause, sip of coffee. She noticed the way he glanced toward the door again. "Waiting for someone?" she asked. Arthur looked surprised. "No." He considered the door for a moment. "Just a habit, I suppose." He took another bite. "My wife used to meet me places." The words came simply, not dramatic, just factual. Martha nodded slowly. "That must have been nice." "It was." Arthur didn't elaborate right away. He finished another bite, then rested the fork beside the plate. "Her name was Helen." Martha didn't interrupt. Arthur looked down at the table. "She liked diners like this," he said. "Didn't care for fancy restaurants." "Too quiet," he added. Martha glanced around the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint music from the jukebox, the clatter of dishes behind the counter. "Plenty of noise here," she said. Arthur smiled a little. "Yes." He picked up the coffee mug again. "We used to come here years ago," he said. "Not every night like I do now. Just once in a while." Martha hadn't known that. "You and Helen?" "Yes." Arthur's eyes moved slowly across the room. "They changed the booths," he said, "but the floor's the same." Martha looked down. The checkerboard tiles had been there longer than she had. "They probably will be another 40 years," she said. Arthur chuckled softly. "Maybe." He returned to the plate. A few more bites passed before he spoke again. She passed 5 years ago. The words rested on the table between them, not heavy, but quiet. Martha didn't say she was sorry right away. People often said that quickly, sometimes too quickly. Instead, she nodded gently. Arthur seemed comfortable with the silence. After a moment, he continued. First year after that was strange. How so? Martha asked. Arthur wiped his mouth with the napkin. You don't realize how much space another person fills until it's empty. He looked at the seat beside him, not just the chair. The air. Martha understood that more than she expected. My husband passed 10 years ago, she said quietly. Arthur looked up. I'm sorry. She nodded once. The conversation settled into a quieter place. Arthur finished the last of the meatloaf. He placed the fork down. You get used to the quiet eventually, he said. Not completely, but enough. Martha glanced toward the window. The night outside looked still. Do you cook much at home? She asked. Sometimes, but cooking for one isn't the same. He smiled faintly again. You either make too much or not enough. That's true, Martha said. Arthur folded the napkin. He did it carefully, pressing the edges flat with his fingers. This place helps, he added. The diner? Yes. How? Arthur thought for a moment. Well, he looked toward the counter. People moving around. The sound of plates. The bell on the door. He shrugged slightly. It reminds you the world's still moving. Martha nodded slowly. I suppose that's true. Arthur reached into his coat pocket and removed his wallet. He counted the bills as he always did, placed them beneath the plate. Then he added the $2 tip, the same as every evening. You don't have to tip every time, Martha said gently. Arthur looked surprised. It's only right. You're here every night. Yes. That's why. Martha didn't argue. Arthur stood slowly from the booth. He picked up his coat from the seat beside him. Good talking with you tonight, Martha. You too, Arthur. He paused a moment, then said quietly, Helen would have liked you. Martha smiled. I would have liked her too. Arthur nodded once. Then he walked toward the door. The bell rang softly as he stepped outside. Cold air drifted in for a moment before the door closed again. Martha remained seated in the booth for another minute, just listening to the quiet diner. The grill cook called from the counter. You talkin' a break back there? Just a minute, she replied. She stood up and carried Arthur's plate to the counter. The napkin lay folded neatly beside it. $2 rested on top. The next evening, Arthur came again. 5 o'clock, same booth. But this time, when Martha brought the coffee, she slid into the seat without asking. Arthur smiled. Evening. Evening, she said. They didn't talk much that night. Just a few small things. The weather, a new grocery store opening down the street. The song playing on the jukebox. Arthur ate the meatloaf, sipped his coffee. Sometimes they sat quietly for several minutes. Neither seemed uncomfortable with that. When he finished, he counted the money again, placed it under the plate, $2 on top. You'll be here tomorrow? He asked. Most likely. Good. He stood up, walked to the door. The bell rang again. Martha watched him cross the parking lot. The streetlights reflected faintly on the pavement. Then he disappeared down the sidewalk toward Maple Street. Weeks passed. Arthur kept coming. Some evenings they spoke. Some evenings they didn't, but Martha often sat down for a few minutes now, just long enough to drink half a cup of coffee herself. Other customers noticed occasionally. No one minded. It felt natural. One evening, Arthur pointed toward the jukebox. That song was Helen's favorite, he said. Another evening, he told Martha about the hardware store where he used to work, 40 years behind the same counter, selling nails and paint brushes, listening to customers explain small home problems. You learn a lot about people when they're fixing things, he said. Martha believed that. One quiet evening, she asked him something she had wondered for weeks. Why every day? Arthur looked thoughtful. For dinner, you mean? Yes. He took a slow sip of coffee. Well, he looked around the diner, the booths, the counter, the door. It's easier to come somewhere familiar, he said, than to sit in a quiet house every evening. Martha nodded. Arthur added softly, and it's nice seeing a familiar face. Martha didn't respond right away, but she understood. The diner hummed quietly around them. A plate clattered somewhere near the kitchen. The doorbell rang as another customer entered. Arthur finished the last sip of coffee. Then he folded the napkin again, the same careful way. He counted the money. Placed the $2 tip on top. See you tomorrow, Martha. See you tomorrow, Arthur. He stood, walked to the door. The bell rang once more, and Martha noticed something small. For the first time in many evenings, Arthur didn't glance back at the empty seat across from him before leaving. The first snow came quietly that year. It started sometime in the early afternoon, long before Arthur's usual arrival. By 5 o'clock, the parking lot outside the diner had turned pale and soft under the streetlights. Martha noticed the snow the way she noticed most things, without stopping what she was doing. She wiped the counter, refilled a coffee cup, placed a slice of pie on a plate. Still, every so often, she glanced toward the door. 5 o'clock passed. The bell did not ring. That was unusual, but not alarming. Arthur had been a few minutes late before. She poured his coffee anyway. Steam curled upward from the mug and faded slowly into the diner air. 5:10, 5:15. A couple walked in shaking snow from their coats. A delivery driver picked up a bag of takeout and left again. The mug of coffee cooled. Martha poured it out and made another. 5:20. She told herself the sidewalks were probably slick. Arthur was careful when he walked. 5:25. The bell rang. Martha looked up quickly, but it was Arthur. Just a man from the gas station across the road brushing snow off his shoulders. She returned to the counter. 5:30. She made another mug of coffee. The grill cook noticed. "You expecting someone?" he asked. Martha wiped the counter slowly. "Just a regular," he shrugged. "Snow slows people down." "Yes," she said, it did. 5:40. The snow outside thickened. The parking lot lights blurred behind the falling flakes. Martha glanced at the door again, still nothing. She wondered if Arthur had decided to stay home. That wouldn't be strange. The sidewalks were probably slick now, but the thought felt odd somehow. Arthur liked routine, and Arthur liked the diner. 5:50. The bell finally rang. Martha turned before she realized she was turning. Arthur stood in the doorway. Snow dusted the shoulders of his coat. His hair held a few white flakes that hadn't melted yet. He closed the door gently behind him. The bell settled back into silence. "Evening," Martha said. Arthur brushed his sleeve lightly. "Evening." He walked toward the back booth, a little slower than usual, not dramatically slower, just careful. Martha brought the coffee before he sat down. "You made it through the snow." Arthur smiled faintly. "It's not too bad." He slid into the booth, wrapped both hands around the mug, held it there. "You walked?" she asked. "Yes." "That sidewalk's probably slippery." Arthur nodded. "It is." Martha slid into the seat across from him. She didn't ask this time. Arthur didn't seem surprised. Outside the window, the snow continued falling in steady silence. "Cold night," she said. Arthur nodded. "Yes." He looked toward the window for a moment. "Helen liked the first snow." Martha listened. "She used to stand by the window and watch it for a while," he said. "Didn't say much. Just watched." He took a sip of coffee. The warmth seemed to reach his hands slowly. Martha noticed he kept both palms around the mug longer than usual. "You all right?" she asked quietly. Arthur looked up. "Yes," he paused. "Just a little tired tonight." Martha nodded. "That snow takes effort to walk through." Arthur smiled faintly. "That must be it." The meatloaf arrived a few minutes later. Martha carried the plate over, the same meal as always. Arthur thanked her, cut the meatloaf slowly. One bite, pause, sip of coffee. The rhythm remained the same, but Martha noticed something small. Arthur rested between bites a little longer tonight, not struggling, just slower. The diner remained quiet. Snow had kept most people home. The jukebox played an old piano song that drifted softly through the room. Arthur finished half the plate, then he rested the fork beside the dish. "Good meatloaf," he said. "Same recipe." "Then it's a good recipe." Martha smiled. Arthur lifted the mug again. The steam had faded, but the warmth remained. "Funny thing about routines," Arthur said after a moment. "How's that?" Martha asked. "You don't realize how important they are until something interrupts them." Martha thought about that. "I suppose that's true." Arthur looked around the diner slowly. The booths, the counter, the door with the small bell above it. "I like this place," he said. "I'm glad," Martha replied. Arthur looked back at her. "I'm glad you sit down sometimes." Martha felt a small warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Me too," she said. Arthur returned to the plate, finished the last of the meal slowly. The same way he always had. He folded the napkin carefully, pressed the edges flat with his fingers, then he reached for his wallet. Martha watched him count the bills. 1, 2, 3. He placed them under the plate, then the $2 on top, the same as always. Arthur rested his hand on the table for a moment, then he stood. The booth seat lifted slightly as his weight left it. He slipped on his coat. "You be careful walking home," Martha said. Arthur nodded. "I will." He paused beside the table. Then he said something quietly. "Thank you for sitting down that first night." Martha looked up. "You're welcome." Arthur smiled, not the small, polite smile he usually gave, something warmer. Then he turned and walked toward the door. The bell rang softly as he opened it. Cold air drifted inside for a moment. Arthur stepped out into the snow. The door closed behind him. Martha stood by the counter, watching through the window. Arthur walked slowly across the parking lot. Snowflakes moved around him in the light. He reached the sidewalk, turned toward Maple Street, and disappeared into the quiet night. The snow continued through the evening. When the diner closed, Martha wiped the last table and stacked the chairs. The grill cook turned off the lights in the kitchen. "Drive safe," he said. "You too." Martha pulled on her coat. Before leaving, she glanced once more toward the back booth. The same booth Arthur always chose, the seat where she had begun sitting across from him. The coffee mug still rested on the counter nearby. She rinsed it and placed it back on the rack. Then she turned off the lights. The next evening came. The snow had stopped. The sidewalks were cleared. 5 o'clock arrived. The diner waited in its quiet rhythm. Martha poured a mug of coffee. Steam rose slowly from the surface. 5:02. The bell rang. Arthur stepped inside. No snow this time, just the cold air behind him. "Evening," he said. "Evening," Martha replied. He walked to the back booth, sat down, wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. And Martha slid into the seat across from him without saying a word. Outside, the last patches of snow glowed under the streetlights. Inside, the diner hummed softly. Arthur lifted the mug and took a slow sip. Then he set it back down. Neither of them spoke for a while, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It simply felt shared.